Call the April 21st, 2025 Polk City Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Roll call.
Hankins,
Here.
Bowersox,
Here.
Rickens,
Here.
Vogel,
Here.
Olfest,
Here.
Yanowski.
Here.
Item number 3, approval of the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve.
I'd like to amend the agenda, add public comment under item 6.
All right, is there a motion to approve the amended?
I make a motion to approve the amended agenda for April 21st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same. Okay. Item number 4, approval of P&Z Commission meeting minutes for March 17th, 2025.
I make a motion to approve those minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Item 5, Leonard Senior Living Site Plan Reapproval. City Engineer Report.
Hello, Commission. So for the Commission's consideration tonight is an unaltered, originally approved site plan. The purpose of tonight's agenda item is the reapproval of a site plan in accordance with Chapter 157 of Polk City Code. A site plan is valid for 1 year from the time of approval, which was March 27th, 2023. And then the code further explains that the city council can, without action from the Planning and Zoning Commission or without another formal approval, extend the approval of that site plan for an additional calendar year, totaling 2 years. Unless the site plan has been constructed or actual construction has been completed, which in the case of Polk City Municipal Code is defined as any permanent incorporation of site plan improvements, and that work on the site plan is progressing at a reasonable and understandable rate. So tonight's business item is strictly for you guys to reapprove the site plan as was originally submitted. City staff recommends approval, and the purpose of tonight's reapproval and the timing of all this is the developers have indicated to us that financing of a facility like this will be exceedingly difficult without an approved site plan on file. So this is us working with the developer to assist in making this facility come to fruition. And our understanding is that construction, all things go according to plan, should happen yet this year. The developer's here if you guys have any specific questions, but we'd recommend approval of this site plan.
Okay. Anything you, developer, would like to add?
Yeah, I can add. Ross Nichols. No, the last 18 months have
We
been.
get your address too.
Oh, sorry. 2345 Southeast Willowbrook Drive, Waukee, Iowa,
Thank you.
50263. Last 18 months have been a little brutal in the financing world, or specifically equity raise. So we've hit the ground running again. 2025 has actually been a pretty awesome year thus far from an equity raise standpoint. So we've already got about $2 million raised that we've invested into the project just through the design process, approvals, and getting the construction documents done. Within the last probably 6 to 8 weeks, we've probably got another $2.5 to $3 million worth of commitments. So we are in the home stretches. So we're close. Our intention, we're gearing up with our contractor and everyone to hopefully get things moving. Call it early summer if we can. So that's what we're gearing for. So after that, we're looking at about a 16-month construction schedule. So getting a lot of phone calls from residents wanting to know when we're starting. So I think they've got some loved ones that would love to move in. So trying to make it happen.
Awesome.
So any questions?
I'm very encouraged that you're moving forward.
We love this
Community
project. We love the location. We love the community. It's needed.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Thank you.
appreciate it.
Any public comment on the item? Nope. All right.
I'd make a motion for reapproval of the Leonard Senior Living site plan unaltered.
Second.
Roll call?
Higgins.
Yes.
Vogel.
Yes.
Olmstead.
Yes.
Van Alstine.
Yes.
Hankins.
Yes.
Butterfield.
Yes.
All right, item passes. Item 6, West Bridge Road Commercial Preliminary Plat 1 discussion. I'm assuming we have these in an order, developers listed first, if,
Good evening again. Trent Smith with ATI Group, 1615 Southwest Main Street, Ankeny, Iowa. Haven't seen you for a couple weeks now. I want to just open up with sharing our gratitude for approving our basically grading plan. We think the property's starting to look a little bit more commercial. If you haven't driven by lately, I highly recommend it. And since the house has been down and there's equipment on site, we've had quite a bit of activity on the property from potential end users. And that's why we've brought this item in front of you tonight. In short, we've met with staff just last week, I think, related to a healthcare user that's looking for retail space on this property. And we are having a difficult time deriving a lease rate or price in the ground that we can provide this end user because we're still working through site plan concepts, building costs, and this access connection item that's on discussion in front of you tonight. What we'd like to do is leave this meeting with some discussion related to the concepts in front of you and potentially some general alignment or some feedback on what you guys like about our concepts, don't like about our concepts, and what you think about this access road connection, so that we can provide a response to really all users, but specifically this first user that has reached out. So I've provided, it's really 6 concepts, and I'm going to use them as visual tools to walk through how we've looked at this property in terms of layout and connection to the lakeside property. We really like the Simonson concept that doesn't have an exhibit number on it, but it's the first one, I believe, in the attachment that has one large building to the north and then like a restaurant on the hard corner. We think we have good circulation around the property in terms of just, it allows for some drive-through users. It really creates a flexible space that's going to attract the most diverse commercial users in that retail and restaurant space that Polk City needs. And then Exhibit 1 is essentially the same concept, but with 2 buildings. We're looking at both concepts as we get construction costs back and trying to derive what makes most sense logistically and how to start this phase. So those 2 concepts are our ideal layout at this time, but we've had conversations with staff about what the property would look like if we connect to this lakeside property and conform to that access agreement that currently stands in place from 2016. And so we've ran into a couple issues, and 2 of the concepts, Exhibit 2 and 3, are operating under the assumption we had a question, and I can't remember if it was from our conversations, Travis and Chelsea, or if it was commissioned last time we were here. But what would it look like if we just connect our parking lots? And so if we connect our 2 parking lots, if you look at Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 3, it generates some steep slopes around 10%. And the reason it's generating slopes so steep is the elevation change from the lakeside parking lot and the highest point we can get with allowable drive slopes per SUDAS at the back end of that parking drive. To put it in a sense of scale, the south Quickstar access on Parker, so the steep one closest to the intersection, is 6.5%. The National Highway Institute recommends a maximum entrance off of Collector Road, so Parker's a collector road, 5 to 6%. SUDAS uses that as a snippet in their access design. But they recommend a maximum slope for commercial entrances at 7%. So in both cases, if we're looking at this in terms of kind of an entrance to our project, which it is, we're exceeding that maximum slope. And so if we continue on to Exhibits 4 and 5, we've taken a look at how can we lengthen that transition period. Because if we add length to the transition and the elevation is about the same, we're going to have lower slopes. And we've provided a couple exhibits here, one that shows it off the full access to the north and one that shows it off the right in, right out access to the south. And the reason we've done that, the connection, according to the Lakeside site plan, is off that right in, right out access. That's where their site plan has it extended to our property and the location they have planned for us to connect. What we're trying to show in terms of moving that connection, we've had no discussions with Lakeside in terms of their appetite to move it, but what we're trying to show is moving the connection doesn't mitigate the slopes. It just presents the same issues in a different location. So to go back to Exhibit 4 and 5, it does reduce the slope from really the front part of the parking lot to the Lakeside parking lot to allowable standards. So if we go with that south right in, right out, we're gonna look at a slope similar to that Quick Start entrance. If we go to the north, we're looking at something a little bit better. What we don't like about these two connections is that if we go to Exhibit 4, and I'm jumping around a lot, so feel free to interrupt, I'm kind of going fast. But if we look at Exhibit 4, and we have the small building to the north and the connection to Lakeside with that 4.9% slope, if we take out that area for the access road and give us a buildable parcel north of that road, it's gonna leave us with 0.7 acres. To put that in a local scale as well, that's about the scooter site. So what we don't love about that is it just pigeonholes us into a very specific user that only can use or only needs 0.7 acres. And then if we look at the south connection and we take out that road area again and just look at the developable area, that hard corner, it leaves us at 0.98 acres. A typical QSR, so fast food type restaurant on a hard corner like that. So McDonald's on 36th Street's about 1.54 acres. Slim Chicken's on 36 and Highway 69's 1.6. Jethro's and Ankeny's 1.6. So if we're focusing on restaurant and retail like that first concept shows, that I think, at least I think Polk City needs those types of uses. We're gonna provide a lot if that road goes in. That's not market and too small for that type of use. We also, this is just preliminary concept, so quick hand drawing, a lot can change with these types of concepts, but what we don't love too is these dead-end parking lots. When we do these retail strips, a lot of times we like to provide circulation all the way around the building. Part of that is so that you can differentiate employer parking and pedestrian parking, but also a lot of times you want EMS vehicles to kind of fully circulate the site. So that's kind of where we like concepts 1 and 2. That's really the geometric portion of my presentation. Any questions regarding the geometrics before I go on to a couple other items related to these concepts and to some discussions we're having? I'll keep going, we could always come back. Another reason why we don't love this, but why we're having this discussion tonight is, like I mentioned when I opened this presentation, is we just want to understand our significant cost items related to this parcel. So we have a lot of those figured out. The action on this property has led us to hire a contractor and get construction costs for some buildings right now. We have a significant storm pipe that's going to need to be installed to take care of the drainage with the creek. That's a very high cost item we're looking into and how we deal with that. And we have an assessment, but this is a high cost item that we don't quite have the details on what that does to the property. It's hard to really quantify that right now, but what we can accommodate the cost of this connection. But what it does to our end users is it takes the cost of that frontage road and it reduces the building size. So the spread of that cost is spread across a lower square foot and ends up being carried by the burden of the end user. So that just a quick note there on that. I have looked around on Google Earth, and when I'm driving around, we've looked at this often to try to figure out good circulation on this site and how we can be compatible with neighboring properties. A lot of times churches, they're just really big, so they're bordered by roads. So Old Lakeside, completely bordered by roads, so not really relevant to this comparison. The Lutheran Church of Hope in West Des Moines is such a big campus that there's no adjacent commercial properties. Really, the only two local ones that have immediately adjacent commercial use next to a church is Prairie Ridge Church on 36th Street in Ankeny, if you're familiar with that, and Lutheran Church of Hope in Ankeny as well. And they're totally separate than their commercial partners. So the request isn't, I would say, outside of a precedent that's relatively local to this area. Our other kind of discussion item that we've had, this is probably the first time that we've argued against having more access. Usually when we develop a piece of property, we want all the access points that you can give us. But our concern is all these items based on the benefit that this property and the lakeside property is gonna see, which when we narrow it down, we have to have businesses here opened at the same time that Lakeside's seeing significant traffic. And then a portion of that group has to have a need to go from Lakeside when they're visiting Lakeside to a business on this parcel that's open at that same time. And on top of that, they have to want to travel from property to property via a vehicle. And so we think that is just not a lot of trips generated for this parcel to put in a road that we can tell end users it's a significant benefit to them. So those are all the questions we've asked ourselves that have led to these concepts and led to these discussion items. And really what we would like coming out of this discussion tonight is just some feedback. What you like about some of these concepts, what you don't like about some of these concepts, your general stance on this connection, so that we can correctly market this property, deliver on a lease rate, and deliver on this project as a whole. So any questions? I'm happy to field as many as you want. Or maybe after Travis goes.
Travis,
I
anything you
think
want
that'd be
to add?
helpful too.
Add to that?
The big thing that I wanted to mention is, just so that the commission's clear, what we're looking back, or what we're looking for is feedback. We're gonna treat this very similarly. This commission reviewed, the type of storage site plan a couple times before an actual site plan was made. We're looking for something similar to that, where you guys give your feedback. You don't necessarily have to commit one way or the other in terms of, I really like concept one, don't like concept two. I absolutely wouldn't approve concept one if a driveway isn't included, that kind of thing. The other thing that's worth noting and understanding is that this is the final piece of commercial property within the Bridge Road commercial corridor, and every other property has been required to do this. The other feedback that you could give us is you could be interested in a wait and see approach, where ATI Realty has put together concepts in which they could conceivably defer an access road. And if we start to see issues with traffic coming off a bridge or some of these other things, we have a mechanism by which to require that. So that's really what we're looking for from the commission tonight is, how do you feel about the request of either for sure including it, potentially considering waiving it, deferral, those kinds of things, and then do you have any additional feedback with what the developer and property owner are currently showing?
I have a question. Maybe you guys covered this last meeting. I wasn't here, but the existing frontage road to the east that came down, that kind of curved to the north into the lakeside parking lot. Was there a reason we didn't look at carrying that alignment all the way through along there to the corner parcel?
My understanding of why it was aligned that way was that was how the site plan worked out best. They wanted to minimize the amount of duplicative pavement, and so that's why it's aligned in that. There's also some detention and storm sewer that exists in that southwest corner that they may have been trying to accommodate as well. I'd have to go look specifically at that site plan.
And Travis, that's my recollection as well, was the detention was the driver more than anything else, as the developer wanted to move that access further north so that they could have the detention in the southwest corner, which is the lowest part of that property.
And that makes sense. So Justin, you could probably do the public comments and then the commission could give their feedback as well, since that's been added to the agenda.
Okay. Is there anybody in the public that'd like to comment on this item? Yeah, name and address, please, for the record.
Excuse me, Jason McElravy, 15286 Northwest 126th, Polk City. I am a member at Lakeside. I serve on the safety team there. I'm in the parking lot regularly on Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings. And we're busy. We're very busy. We don't really want to see something else add to the traffic in our parking lot. I believe that this access road would probably take away parking spots. We just added in the about 40 parking spots of concrete when we finished our addition. Palm Sunday, we had no spots available. We were parked on the frontage road and on Edgewater. Just this past Sunday on Easter, we had 6 available parking spots. We were very, very full. So we don't want to see any spots taken away. It just adds to our problem when we're busy. We add traffic into there. I think you're looking at additional personal and property safety. We have kids in the parking lot. We have elderly people in the parking lot. When we add somebody that's not familiar with our traffic patterns, it becomes a problem. I regularly, with a yellow vest, will step out in front of someone to get them to slow down and stop for pedestrian traffic coming in and out of our building. So we don't want to see anybody hurt. We already have a problem off of the frontage road. Last summer, I witnessed a near miss with a young man on a scooter, shot into the parking lot during our VBS, paying no attention to people coming in and out off of Bridge Road. We don't want Lakeside to be in the news because of something like that, that it happened on our property. So for those reasons, I'm opposed to connecting to that property to the west, towards Parker.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment? Commission?
Pardon?
Trent, you were looking for feedback on 2 detentions versus 1 as well on the property. Was that correct in what I'm reading here?
I think we'd take feedback on anything that you have in mind with these concepts. I think tonight specifically about the connection, like Travis mentioned, this isn't a formal site plan submittal. The reason it's not a formal site plan submittal is we're not quite there yet. Don't quite have a user on the hook, but I don't know if you mentioned this last time or not, but parking calcs, detention calcs, all that stuff, circulation with EMS vehicles will be addressed at the site plan process. So this is generally kind of laid out in terms of, we've looked at SUDAS and things like that, but specific city review hasn't been, no eyes have been laid on these concepts yet. So.
Yeah, and I included that as part of our review memo because that was mentioned at the last meeting. So just clarification, if you guys had had time to digest that concept, if you had any comments from the city's perspective, as long as they meet the detention calculations, the code is really flexible in terms of requiring regional versus favoring regional. And so if it's for the benefit of them finding the right hard corner user, I think staff is supportive of less regional detention, understanding that they're sacrificing land mass to do so.
Sure. Yeah.
We've had some users reach out, like I mentioned, no hard bites yet, but close. And this property is 3.7 acres or so, and a lot of users are looking for 1.25 to 1.5 acres. They can get down to 1 if they do underground detention. So I wouldn't be shocked if 1 or 2 of these buildings try to utilize that tool to expand kind of their footprint without having a detention basin there. But back to Travis's comment, we proposed that, I think, as a waiver request maybe with our grading plan, and it was strictly on the stance that we don't have a site plan yet, and we'd like to just put that on everyone's radar, that underground detention might be a potential option here for end users, but not quite there yet.
My concern is with just the 2 entrances and exits on that one side. We're gonna see a lot more near misses, a lot more accidents, just staying right there. Just in my experience as a driver instructor.
Sure.
And I guess I'd like to speak in support of the access management plan that we pieced together, a decade and a half ago. The original concept of that, granted, predated the church property. We had a vision for commercial in that entire strip. At the time, our our zoning did allow for a church to be built on commercial zoned property. After Lakeside went in, we changed our zoning so that that can no longer happen. The vision we had was for people essentially to go from businesses on Tyler all the way over and exit onto Parker and vice versa. So a business at Parker could go all the way over and exit on to Tyler. This isn't a revolutionary concept. It's in every community that we have in the metro. The use of frontage roads that share frontage access across the front of properties in order to minimize the entrance and exit points off of a major highway. That is just standard good traffic management. And I guess I'd like to say it would be difficult for me to come to a conclusion that connecting to the church to this commercial property would be a bad thing for the traffic flow of our community in total. In looking at your individual plans, a couple of them have no access to the east, and so that would be difficult for me to get to. I certainly understand your grade issues. Just a interesting concept or a way to look at it would be on your Exhibit 2, which has the access to the east kind of in the middle. If in that middle building, you could give up your access to the south end of the back parking, or give up that parking and make the building slightly larger to the east, and then make the slope more gradual like you're doing in Exhibit 5, where the slope just continues further on to the west, but you would indeed give up that access to the south end of that parking lot on the east side of the building, which would probably be used for employees anyway, I would guess. Anyway, that's just a thought. Some feedback. I'm a little uncomfortable with Exhibit 5. If we did end up with the backside of a building facing Bridge Road, we would want to be real careful about the architectural look of the backside of that building. So would really have concerns about something like that. And you have a couple of cases. I went through and tried to find, I did a cursory review of some of our zoning today and couldn't find it. You have a couple of the buildings that are backing to detention without any parking between the building and the detention. And what I was looking for was if a sit-down restaurant goes in there, can they build a pole deck over the detention? Does anybody have an idea on that? Just as an out-of-the-box idea as to how can this space be better utilized?
I would tell you, I'm gonna guess nobody's ever thought of that.
Okay,
Based purely on the stuff that I've seen, that's happened in the commercial corridors. I don't know that our code strictly prohibits that.
okay.
I would imagine that there would be some level of structural engineering necessary for that, particularly because this footing would be below water essentially. I don't know that we would have a lot of heartburn about that, and I think that would really, really lend itself to the identity that Polk City has with the lakes and the natural features. I think staff would be supportive of that, and we could work on getting a code requirement that.
Well, yeah, it was just, and in looking at that Exhibit 5 about what could we do to make a building like that look presentable from the backside, I'm not sure I necessarily want to eat a nice dinner overlooking Bridge Road, but that would be one way to make it look better. But like Exhibit 3, there's another building that backs to detention, and that might be a good use for making that building more desirable for a restaurant type facility.
If I could add just one comment in response to that, just from a public access perspective, as I think about the frontage road, like in front of Luena Bank, that one is, there's different grades and it's offset and you gotta go around to get in and out. This potential link would be almost a straight shot through, all the way from Tyler to Parker, which I think would increase public risk through there personally. But other than that, I think it just needs to be looked at. Who knows where it would actually link up, but I think that particular location would be bad.
You're saying extending the existing
Well,
alignment through?
coming down the current frontage road through the parking lot, connecting in this southeast corner as it's currently designed and platted on the Lakeside plat would make, like on exhibit, which one is it? Exhibit 5, that would almost be a straight shot up all the way to Tyler. There wouldn't be any way to slow traffic without a bunch of speed bumps or other stop signs or other ways to slow traffic. So I'm just looking at it from public safety. It would be difficult.
And when you're talking frontage road in that scenario he talked about, are you running that straight from the end of the existing, removing parking lot in that area and taking the road through, or are you navigating through an existing parking lot? You see what I'm saying?
So on it, if you look at it like on exhibit 5, there is currently an access, or I think egress easement. I think it's either that or an access easement, that basically comes north of the detention basin that was platted as part of Lakeside Fellowship's original site plan.
Yep.
So it would essentially take the existing drive aisle, and I believe there might be parking stalls painted there today. So you would take that curb off and you would extend it there. The easement to the property line already exists today, but it would likely cause the removal of, call it 3 to 4 parking stalls, depending on how they line it.
I can add color to that. I brought that with me. And Ron, to echo your comment about frontage road connectivity, I totally wholeheartedly agree. Before I jump into their configuration, so this is their site plan right here. And what I think makes this request a little bit unique is that this is unique. The frontage road or parking lot connection is not unique. If you think of North Ankeny Boulevard, all of those commercial properties are connected with that first parking bay. This would not be the case. So we're gonna have trucks and cars come into this property, and instead of taking an immediate left and coming to our parcel, similar to what the access management plan shows, is immediately coming to our property. This does not follow the red dotted line in the access management plan, and that's what our concern is. Because if it was immediate on that hard corner, someone unfamiliar with Polk City going westbound can see that connection from the right of way. In this particular scenario, you're gonna have to be familiar with this property if you're gonna take a ride into Lakeside to come to our property. They're not gonna see this connection. And that's what our heartache is that it's just not immediate. The other thing I'll point out, looking at this access management plan, and Chelsea and Travis, I know you already commented on the right in, right out to this, related to access off bridge, but in the access management plan, there is a blue dot for potential right in, right out. I know there's a turn lane there, and I don't think that works out because you can't have an access off of a turn lane, but I would be curious if there would be any support, if there was conversations with Lakeside, if we could utilize that right in, right out. And that might answer your comment, Alex, about only 2 access points to our property. Maybe we get a third via right in, right out off Bridge Road instead of connecting to the church parking lot. Don't know if that's an option, but just throwing the information that we've tracked down for discussion.
You're saying the existing turn lane starts right there where the blue dot is?
It looks like it does start right. I mean, this is from 2004, so a little dated, but we could get some dimensions on that. It looks like it's straddling the property line, and I think that's where the
Yeah,
turn
when
starts.
we pieced together the access management plan, there were some of us, myself included, that did not want that right in, right out. And what essentially sold it to us was that it was on the property line and would essentially be there to serve both properties. And you know, personally, I would prefer there wasn't a right in, right out there. If there was, we would certainly need to have a hard median installed on Bridge Road, because we don't have any right in and right outs in our community without a hard median.
Sure.
And
that is the city's policy.
Okay.
We would not categorize something as a right in, right out without a median being involved.
okay,
That was a policy that got adopted softly with some of the Casey's site plan amendments, but was hard adopted as part of the Quick Start
Okay.
development, because they wanted to do pork chop islands, and they just did. Pork chop islands are
They don't work.
obsolete right in, right out treatment. You have to do medians in the center.
okay, yeah. Is there that little triangle thing? Okay, yeah, they're ridiculous. But in any case, I would not like to see the right in, right out. However, our access management plan calls for it. And so I tend to look at what the words say, what was the intent, and what does staff recommend. And even though that's not my preference, that doesn't mean that I couldn't get there. Does that make any sense?
It does, yep. Thanks.
Just for some clarification, my main thing is looking not to have both accesses on Parker Road.
Oh, okay,
So if there's any way to figure out another way,
Sure.
that's.
And just to clarify, if the right in, right out was on Bridge, that would still not cause me to not want the interconnectivity between the two properties.
understood.
Yeah.
Anything else? It's been good.
I think I'll just add, this is sort of a continuation from my comments from last month. I generally have a hard time if our rules were set and everyone knew what those rules were. I have a hard time disregarding those rules simply because we just want something different, which is what it feels like. And I guess maybe to explain a little bit, like, and I understand, I'm a little over the place here for a second, but I understand the concern from Lakeside's concern about safety. And I am very sympathetic to making sure that the kids and the adults and everyone is safe. But everyone in this process knew what the rules were and what the access point requirements were going to be. I wasn't on the commission, so I don't know how that worked for that site plan and things for those adjustments. But the possibility of something like this coming up should have been thought about at some point by the church or whomever was doing it at that point. And now, although last month it was a little bit more of a, well, if we want someone, if we have a tenant who may come in and want this, then we should be able to do that, right? That's how I interpreted what was asked. And I said, my response last month was, but we don't know who's going to be there in 10 or 20 years. And so we need to, I think it's part of our responsibility to make sure that things are set in a way that regardless of who the tenant is, that traffic flows well, that people are safe, that businesses can maintain a business there. And while that has changed a little bit, I'm not feeling like there is a compelling enough argument to say that we shouldn't follow the rules that are laid out. Similar to Ron, I'm not saying I can't get there. I just have a really hard time with the arguments that are posed so far.
Yeah, I think from my take, I look at the current alignment of that frontage road and that's the biggest question because in my mind, why did we not maintain that alignment? Why did we build a detention pond in that place? Because I like the connectivity of it. And I'd really wanna see the plan at how we go through the parking lot to make sure that's gonna be something everybody feels good about and doesn't increase any liability or safety anywhere, but. So that's, I agree with you on the connectivity. I like that. I just wanna make sure it's done in a manner that people expect and doesn't create additional issues for us, but.
And kind of to the point, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Just one additional point that I didn't cover before, but when we built and when we did our site plan at Lakeside, Edgewater was not in. So there was no access out the north. And now it's there, there is another potential for access. So there is a little bit of a shift on potential access to that property that wasn't there when we built back in 2016.
Was that talked about with their initial plan of future connectivity, I'm gonna guess? Or-
Edgewater Drive has been shown in its current, or a reasonably similar alignment since 2004. It's shown on the access management
Yeah.
plan as adopted.
I think you do get in a scenario where you could start having cut through and Bridge and Parker are busy, and I guess that's a concern there too, though, that.
And I was, on, which one was it? Well, any of them that have the access through or from Lakeside on the north side, which aligns directly to the outlet to Parker. I mean, let's be real, how many people would not be like, oh, it's really busy over here, I want to avoid Broadway, or I'm sorry, Jiminy Christmas, not Broadway. Bridge, I'm gonna go this direction, right? I mean, that is obviously something that I think is not helpful for anyone. So I'm sensitive to that being a workaround, so to speak. And frankly, if I'm coming off of Bridge, I'm not thinking, even as someone who lives here, I'm not thinking to go to the back of the parking lot to then get access over, right? That doesn't necessarily logically to me make sense, but maybe if it's off of the Edgewater around somehow, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sort of speaking off the cuff on this one, but that is something that I was sensitive to, that driving through to get to the back of it seemed weird to me.
Any other comments or any clarification from you guys need? Did you get anything valuable or?
Tyler Leo, 1615 Southwest Main Street, Ankeny, 50023, right? I think one point that we want to kind of bring up, and Justin, you said it, is I think the access management plan is really valuable. I think the frontage road concept is consistent in all the metro cities that we see. I think one thing has changed. One, the incorporation of Edgewater has kind of changed the need for this frontage road. You could argue that. I think having both is not a problem at all. If you look at the original access management plan, that access road, as you guys kind of mentioned, went into the south portion of our property. That, just from an economic standpoint, made the most sense because those alignments with the road and the elevations made the most sense, and we could tie those through a parking lot to get to our first access on Parker. And I think when Lakeside site plan was approved, I think that was good engineering, bringing the detention where it wanted to be. And what ended up happening was that access was now in the middle of our property. And that's what's causing the issues that we're talking about here. You bring up a good point. I think we haven't got into the actual numbers of all of this. But what we found as we're talking to these potential tenants is by incorporating that frontage road where it stands today, it's taking down some of the usable square footage that Trent mentioned. It's putting a development cost on these buildings that, again, it's part of it. We understand that. But what we're getting as feedback is that gets our rents basically to be similar to what Grimes or Ankeny is charging. And the feedback we're getting from these users is that, hey, we love Polk City. We love the growth picture. We love all these things, but we can't pay Grimes rent in Polk City right now. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, here's a cost item that we're really trying to get our heads wrapped around. We have tried, and Trent, I've felt like he's going to quit on me about 3 or 4 times because I've had him run this a million times. By incorporating it either in our parking lot or some way, it creates retaining walls. It really is site specific that I think some of the other groups that have had to abide by this didn't really necessarily have to deal with to some degree. we've really tried to do this, and I'm not saying it's dead and we can't figure this out, but my point is that we wouldn't be coming here talking to you if this wasn't something we've really spent a lot of time figuring out. And like he was saying, is all we want is this discussion and say, here's our problem. Are you willing to work with us a little bit to try to get to the bottom of this and show you all of our work and all of our math so you guys are comfortable that we're not just up here trying to, reduce our construction costs or whatever that is. So I understand all of your guys' points. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that we're working diligently, try to make this project work. We're really excited about it. And we appreciate everything you guys are doing. Yeah, that's it. So thank you guys for your time.
Any other comments or?
I'll just say I want to also thank you guys. I very much appreciate when you guys, not just you all, but when any of the developers come in ahead of time and ask for that feedback, as opposed to, this is our plan, take it or leave it. I appreciate being able to give the feedback and have that discussion to better understand where you're coming from and where our concerns may be and where our concerns may be, before it's just a yes or no only. So thank you.
All right, item 7, access management plan discussion.
All right, Ron, as requested, right?
Yes.
So for some, it will be a refresher. For others, it'll be brand new. But included in your packet tonight are the 3 access management plans or access management policies that we have adopted in Polk City throughout the years. The primary distinction for those that may be unfamiliar is a policy is less concrete. It's more guidance. It's more design standards. It's largely, in a lot of situations, a policy is applied to a less developed corridor.
Can I ask you, you had 3 of them in the packet? Everybody have that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I thought I did.
Yeah, one goes 1 through 5, doesn't it?
Broadway,
7, 1 through 2.
It's Third Street.
see Broadway, Southeast 3rd.
That's the 2 I had.
No, I don't have it.
Is one just a picture? Is that,
So,
Okay.
one, Broadway is a policy, so it is just a written form.
okay,
Bridge is just the diagram, it's just the
Got it.
plan. And then South Third is a mixture of both.
okay, perfect.
If I can get to my screens, I have been having issues with my screen stuff today.
Yeah,
Are we supposed to be
I saw
able to
that.
see on here? Oh, got it, okay.
I didn't print it off.
It's just our style, just a picture.
If we put it on our screens, it wouldn't be helpful.
Are we connected?
Yeah. We have them.
Yeah. Username.
No, wait, push it forward.
Make us look
There you go.
high tech.
But it works differently. So all of those things connect to this and then it should just come on, but I'm not sure why it's not. Yeah, because those just magically work.
I do miss our big zoning maps that we used to have on the wall.
I do not miss the fact that they curl. Right down here.
Always something, because it's not even acting like it registers.
No, they do have.
It's like, this thing goes like this.
Come in
You know what I mean?
Tyler, go around the front of their building and it continues all the way down the subway.
As far as the access
Just
road.
get from the subway to Tyler.
Yeah, this
You
is
just go right through there and up.
frontage road.
Oh,
Of course, this road never went through, right?
Right.
So they did this, and we start taking it.
up through there.
Yeah.
Takes it.
To me, if they'd have forced it to stay here,
Yeah.
pretty back, they start cutting the parking lot. I'm just gonna feed you the parking lot. I'd like to see a defined roadway if you're gonna do it. Yeah. Just gonna-
Oh, so much around there, too many things to do right now.
I think when somebody made this agreement, could look at the grades from here to here. Nobody looked at that, you can't make
Right.
calls without like,
Yeah.
you're outside of standard.
And they can't get on the edge water either. There's too much grade going up.
All right, we can't screen share tonight, we're sorry.
It's always something.
Can you all refer to your packet as we go through this discussion? Okay.
As far as any diagrams, I did not print off.
Mine printed off poorly, but I
I don't have that much toner at the house.
have my
Fair.
computer here.
There. So I think we can talk about it generally, but what I'll tell you is, so we can refer to the plan in the packet later, but so basically a policy is typically applied to a corridor that is less developed or has more redevelopment potential, in which we can't really hammer down into the exact locations, but we can define general characteristics. So the benefit of an access management policy within a community like yours that operates under SUDAS is that you can set spacing requirements, you can set intersection locations, you can set access locations that maybe exceed the requirements of SUDAS. I have not gotten a chance to dig into the exact specifications that are in this, but we make multiple references to SUDAS. So basically, we're playing both sides where we're abiding by our access management plan, but if SUDAS changes and makes it so that ours is less restrictive, SUDAS still governs. But basically, so to kind of bring you up to speed, the access management plan was adopted in November of 2014. It was pretty descriptive in terms of if they were single family versus duplex, and then if they were multifamily versus commercial. Generally speaking, just kind of going through the list here, those single family dwellings and two-family dwellings were meant to align with existing properties and parcels as much as possible. Only one driveway was to be allowed per parcel, and that's if it's a bi-attached duplex home, one access per those combined parcels, or one for each existing parcel. And basically, at the time of adoption in 2014, the parcels as they lay were meant to govern the amount of driveways that were to be constructed along Broadway. So basically, if you had a parcel, say the one that's currently for sale, just by that box culvert up by the elementary school, if that were to be split per the Broadway access management plan management policy, that parcel would be required to have shared access. Because essentially what it did is, at the time of adoption, both planning and zoning, city council, and staff, we all agreed that the number of parcels along Broadway was acceptable, and any additional access would cause other issues that we didn't want to have happen. It defines the widths of those driveways. At the time of redevelopment of an existing parcel, driveways shall be brought into conformance. So that includes paving, that includes widths, that includes curb drops. The other thing is, so if a property along Broadway were to be redeveloped now, we specified that they have to cut into the street pavement. They can't have what we call it's a type B driveway, but I refer to them as the hammerheads, where they basically take the driveway and they graft it onto the edge of the pavement. That's a snow plowing nightmare. Public Works departments hate it. Property owners eventually hate it because the snowplows hit the driveways enough that it obliterates their driveway. So those kinds of things are the ones that we would be able to bring into compliance, as well as gravel or driveways that are way too wide for what we're trying to accomplish. And then, like I mentioned, it does tie back to SUDAS, where intersection and driveway spacing is controlled by SUDAS and the classification of the roadway that we assign to that roadway. By and large, the multifamily, commercial, and industrial buildings, it's directly tied to the site plan. So basically, they can't put a driveway they don't show on a site plan, and it gives both P&Z and council the ultimate decision-making on whether or not that driveway makes sense. It gives us the opportunity to review the operation of Broadway at that time. It allows us to mandate where that intersection spacing has to be, and it allows us to refer to other Polk City codes as required. 24-foot wide, so 12-foot drive lanes in each direction, two-way. And then this actually makes reference to that interconnected parking lot or frontage road as well. So kind of keeping that theme. If you look at, Delaware and Ankeny, North Ankeny Boulevard, pretty much any major collector or above street in communities, there's an access management plan, and if it's a commercial corridor, it's got that interconnected parking lot, interconnected driveway situation. And then again, we call back to SUDAS, and then we define those existing and new parcels, and it's basically a snapshot in time. November 2014 was the snapshot. Anything before that is an existing parcel, anything after that's new. So that's kind of the policy. Does anybody have any questions about Broadway? Want to dig into anything specific?
You had mentioned the property that was for sale. There's an additional property that I see for sale on occasion where Jester Park Drive meets Broadway on the east side of the street. Is that a subdivision or is that an existing lot?
So it's labeled, I've actually got the Polk County stuff pulled up, and it's been part of a plat of survey. It has never been subdivided.
Okay.
So it is, the description is, a bunch of dimensions and directions. And so it's never been platted in accordance with the subdivision ordinance.
And when I see that, I always wonder where the entrance would be to it. And is there a way, would this plan allow us to force them to have their driveway directly across from Jester Park Drive?
Because of the frontage on that parcel, there is no way that they would have a misaligned driveway that meets intersection spacing. So yes.
There's a few wayfinding signs in the way, but looks like that's about it.
Yeah. And ultimately what we would probably do is we would probably move those wayfinding signs ever so slightly to clear the driveway, give them the clear space to make that turn. And then we would also probably put a do not enter. That is the typical treatment for a street intersecting with a driveway intersection, is you put a do not enter. And then if you're not trying to go into that person's driveway, you're not going to enter it, kind of thing.
Okay.
So that would probably be the treatment on that particular parcel. There's a lot of other challenges with that parcel, particularly elevation. Because we've talked to multiple people. I think that since I started in Polk City in 2018, I think that parcel's been owned by 3 different people. And then they ask a couple of questions and then they put it up for sale again.
So get a good geotechnical engineer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, geotechnical, structural, and a lot of patience, I think.
And then a quick additional question further north. I bring this topic up whenever we talk about or traffic issues. For the property As you go up Broadway and get to Prairie Ridge, so the last street on the right going north on Broadway, there's still a field that is north of that that is undeveloped.
Correct.
I have always lobbied for having the access to that property be off of North Drive only and not interconnecting to Broadway. And I still do not believe our street plan, future street plan shows that. I think it shows being a straight through street
Okay.
accessing Broadway. I'm just curious what others think about that.
So this would be the one where it would be really helpful to have the screens.
Yeah.
So here, so everybody can see it, I'll walk around. So the property that Ron is talking about lies below the blue retracement rectangles. And we have seen a concept that does extend North Drive, and I think it meanders this way, but,
And I have seen it going to Broadway.
Which one is North Drive?
North Drive is this one.
Okay.
That currently dead ends.
Okay.
It's labeled Prairie Ridge Lane on my Onyx deal, so, okay.
I know the one, I live right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Prairie Ridge Lane goes south.
I don't live
from
in that one.
intersection.
I'm like, which one
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, so, I can look at that, Ron.
Okay.
And
And it would just be one less access point in a stretch of road where deceleration is normally occurring at the present time from people coming into the city.
And I think too, that's something that as Polk City continues to grow, we're just gonna have to continue to look at in terms of traffic calming as we continue to push further and further into areas that are not, they're set up for county roadways. I think that's the benefit of what we're doing on Sheldall Drive, North Third Street with those roundabouts, is those are natural traffic calming mechanisms that'll help slow people down as they enter the community. But we can look at that. The one caveat and the one piece of feedback I would give is that Polk City has that 30 lot for single access requirement. And if you look right now, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 properties already accessing off of North Drive exclusively. So limiting access onto Broadway may hinder the ability for that property to develop. We can certainly look at it. What I would tell you is that we're going to look at safety concerns. We're gonna look at that intersection spacing, and my hunch would be is that any access that we would put on Broadway would be directly aligned with the driveway to the west. That would be my hunch of where we would mandate that, because I don't think the frontage onto Broadway is big enough to have an offset access that is SUDAS compliant. The other option could be, like we talked about with 1401, would be a right in, right out. So we could certainly look at that. I don't think there's anything that precludes us from looking at that in the policy, but we can definitely look at that.
And then lastly, since we're talking Broadway, and you mentioned traffic calming, the intersection further north with Northwest Big Creek Drive has some seasonal congestion issues with long boat traffic and trailers where that intersection gets backed up. And also, that is a concern with people coming into town at a higher rate of speed from Madrid. Is there any thought of a three-way stop or a roundabout there? The roundabout would be pretty close to the bridge, would be a concern.
There has not been any consideration given to that, but I think as we continue to push north, particularly, I'm gonna guess what we would talk about that with is that open lot that we were just talking about. If that were to develop, we would certainly look at that. I think the problem with a roundabout or a traffic signal there is gonna be the way that we design traffic signals are based on the signal warrants, and it's really difficult to get seasonal traffic to warrant a signal. I think the three-way stop probably is more of a conceivable option.
And you'd mentioned the empty lot. I just want to make sure it was Big Creek Drive, not that I'm talking about, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
Yeah, because essentially the way that we're kind of looking at it is, as that next property develops, let's continue to look north,
Okay,
right?
okey-doke.
Jump one or two intersections up, because that development is gonna drive additional traffic. So are there other things that it's driving? Because that's the other thing. And I think the other reason we really haven't dug too deep into that is I think some of the traffic that goes across the dam today, when Four Seasons eventually gets built out and we knuckle off Hug Drive, I think some of that traffic may dissipate. And so I think we want to take a look at the whole picture and not a snapshot in time that may change.
okay.
But I think those are all good points, and I think those are all things that we're definitely going to keep looking at as we continue to push out into areas that Polk City doesn't currently exist. So any other questions from the commission on Broadway? Okay, so what we'll move to now would be the Bridge Road. This is the one that nobody's gonna be able to see, but basically, what we're looking at here is very, very prescriptive. At that point in time, we felt really, really good about it being a commercial corridor. We knew what our intersection spacing was gonna be, and we worked with the DOT to mandate what that spacing is. What I will tell you is any modification to this access management plan in the DOT's right-of-way would require DOT coordination again, which can be a long and tenuous process. But basically, what you'll see on this plan is full access locations, which are spaced at approximately 600 feet. That would be the DOT's recommended separation for, I think it's called a municipal rural collector. They have a bunch of different designations. They get a lot further into the weeds in terms of designations than SUDAS does. SUDAS, it's locals, collectors, minor arterial, major arterial. Those are really the designations, whereas they get a little bit further into what's the roadway like, what setting is it in, what cross section does it have, things like that. So that's what that 600 feet was based on. By and large, what I would tell you is I don't think, at this point, I think we feel really good about Bridge Road. I think we've done a really nice job of managing those access points. And I think the discussion tonight at 1401 West Bridge, I think was a good one. And I think you guys are all thinking about access management in the right way and trying to protect some of the most important corridors in your community. Because that's really what access management boils down to. When we look at transportation, we're looking to make things simpler. We're looking to make drivers think less, and we're looking to eliminate the amount of unexpected things that happen. So if you can add turn lanes, you can stop or limit intersections, you can limit driveways, those kinds of things eliminate the amount of decisions that drivers have to make, and it makes things a lot easier. Another example of that, the big thing right now in transportation engineering is road diets. So you're taking these large, wide open corridors that have excessive amounts of speed, excessive amounts of accidents, and you're narrowing them down to be nearer to their capacity, but then you're taking those things out of the through traffic. One of the projects I worked on was the 6th Avenue streetscape there north of Mercy Hospital, where we took 2 through lanes in each direction with the outside lanes sometimes having parking, and we went down to 1 through lane in each direction, a 2-way left in the middle, and then parking on each side. The first question out of the public's mouth at that PIM was, why are you taking lanes away? Well, because we're giving you parking. You know, if somebody knows that they can just drive through and they have a turn lane in the middle, you're eliminating a lot of decision points. And so that's kind of the premise of what we put or what thought goes into these access management plans. So I think Bridge Road is a good example of one that we've lived with for a long, long time. We've done a really nice job of managing those accesses. And I think at this point, we take it through full build at 1401 and, we don't touch it. So that's a good one that I guess to have you guys be familiar with of why we've done what we've done, why those agreements are in place, and why those intersections are the way they are. So any questions about Bridge right now? Okay. And then we'll go, so the last one is the hybrid approach, which is the access management from along South Third plus an access management plan. So South Third is one that's really interesting and really unique in that it is a largely developed corridor, but there is appetite for it being redeveloped. So controlling those accesses in the interim doesn't seem all that important because there's not a lot of open lots, but at the same time, there's a great deal of potential of commercial development along South Third. So this policy looks a little different in that we tell them when conformance is required, and then we really go into the nuts and bolts aspect of these different properties. So we've listed out the existing single-family properties with access off of lower order streets, being that Polk City's code requires if a corner lot has access to a lower category street, that the access to that street be maintained. So basically, that's another access management policy we have in our code that really drives residential driveways to lower classification roadways to protect those collector streets as they continue to develop. So basically the way this is set up is if an existing single-family dwelling has access off a lower classification roadway, that's where it's going to stay. If you've got one that is an existing single-family access onto South Third, the policy says you should put it on lower classification roadways if you're a corner lot, and any access onto Third is approved. You can't assume any access that you have today is going to be maintained if there's an option for another access. And then further, we talk about the undeveloped residential property. I think this one, there's a potential that we could probably go revisit that in terms of when these properties develop. As of right now, it doesn't look like any of them have redeveloped. And then talking about the developed and undeveloped parcels on Third Street and where those accesses are coming from. And then to kind of illustrate that, we've prepared this plan that lays out where accesses are allowed, what we're looking for existing versus proposed, and where joint accesses are. So a good example is the existing commercial facility, more or less across from Ace Hardware, just a little bit south, but more or less across from Ace Hardware. There's a driveway that kind of swings out and there's a hammerhead out here. Well, 900 South Third, that's going to be their primary access. And this plan allows us to regulate against that. And so I think that's really the basis for the commission's purposes of an access management policy and an access management plan, is it gives you something outside of code to say, this is what we want and this is what we're doing. And it's more of a living, breathing document that can be adopted a little quicker. And it shows intent without being prescriptive. So I think that's the benefit of what we've got going on South Third, is we're really protecting those access points. We've laid out a plan of exactly what we want out of those access points, but we have the flexibility with the policy to be able to say, in this one particular case, we've got a corner lot that it doesn't make sense to put it on a lower classification roadway. Or, we've got this really nice restaurant coming in that we understand having access on a lower classification roadway is going to impact the neighborhood negatively, and we want to keep it on Third Street. So that's kind of the benefit that we have with a policy versus a plan, is we kind of have that flexibility of, here's the ones that the plan illustrates exactly the ones we have to have, and then the policy allows us to set the intermediate and interim access points along that corridor. So does the commission have any questions? Ron, does that bring everybody up to speed, I think?
I believe so. Yeah, I was just uncomfortable at the last meeting with some of the things that I didn't recall, and I think I was the only one here when it was passed. And so I just, and I couldn't find it online. That was another scary thing, was if I couldn't find it online and couldn't even read what it was.
And so we'll make sure too, do you guys have a point on your website for that?
No, but we could put it under the
Development.
development where we've been creating a more user-friendly page.
Because we're trying to make sure that when somebody comes to a pre-application meeting with staff, that they're as informed as they can be. We're trying to provide those resources. So that's something that we can make sure that get taken care of, so that if you just search access management plan on the website, it comes up. You guys don't have any questions? That's what I had prepared. I think familiarity is good with it, particularly as Polk City continues to put rooftops on the market. I think commercial is gonna become more and more prevalent. I think you guys are gonna see, well, you're gonna continue to see single-family residential. That's just the nature of it, but I think you guys are gonna continue to see commercial coming in quote-unquote infill areas where we've already got lots developed. They're looking at specific places and they're redeveloping or developing undeveloped land versus, out. I think there's commercial coming in the interim, but I think, or out on the periphery of what Polk City is today. But I think ultimately that's gonna be a lot of what this commission is tasked with in the coming years, is a lot of infill, a lot of fill in the existing commercial you've got, and redevelopment of some residential properties along 3rd Street and along Bridge Road. So with that, that's what I've got for the commission, unless there's any questions.
Just kind of, since it is kind of related to the access management plans, did staff get what they needed out of tonight's meeting?
I think so. I think we had what, to me, and I can let Chelsea speak to this too, but I think your thoughts reinforced our feelings in terms of, we felt that the commission would have to be presented with a very specific reason, a very specific use, and I've never known this commission to say absolutely positively no. But I think it reinforced for us that the commission is willing to listen, but it's gonna have to be a very good reason. I think, is that a fair takeaway? Yes or no? I think that was always our thought and our understanding. What I will tell you is, when I talk to other city engineers at Snyder, this commission is talked very highly of because you're very thoughtful. You know your code and you think about it, but you also understand that, unfortunately, you're not Ankeny. You can't turn away commercial development. You gotta be able to work with them. So I think this commission strikes a really good balance that I think is very thoughtful and still protects this community in a manner that's responsible.
I don't have anything to add. I reiterate all that Travis said.
No further questions on access management? Thank you. We're going to item 8, reports and particulars. Council liaison.
Good evening, Commission. It seems like it's been a long time since I was last here, but happy to be here in front of you. I'm just going to go over a few highlights over the past probably month that, if you're not aware of, to bring them to your attention. Most importantly, we finalized and certified our census. So the special census that we had last year, we ended up with 6,533 residents, which was almost an increase of 1,000. So that's really good for our community. That's going to allow us to, I believe as of this month or May, start realizing additional road use tax and local option sales tax.
This month, yes.
This month, so that's really good. And based on the work of our community of doing actually the self-response, the price of the special census was about half the price. So the ROI on the census for our community over the next several years was to our benefit. So that's a good thing for our community. We did finalize a 25-year lease with the Army Corps of Engineers for the property east of the sports complex. That is so we could obviously start work on putting the trail in. As you can see, there's some marking being done. I think some brush coming down or what have you. So exciting stuff that's going to be happening over there. We just finished our 2026 budget. A lot of work by staff and everyone everyone to get our operating budget for '26 without increasing our levy. That was pretty huge with a lot of the legislation that's happening. I'll be curious to see what it's going to look like next year, but I know it was a big challenge for our staff to be able to do that and add a couple additional desperately needed FTEs to staff. So the other item that we recently just spoke about last week was, if you were not aware, the Iowa Supreme Court shifted liability for sidewalk repair, or liability, I should say, to city. So even though the budding property owner is still responsible for the cost to fix the sidewalk, any sort of liability of someone getting injured is the city's liability. So we're starting the process now. Public Works will be going through and doing an inventory of all of our sidewalks in the community to kind of get an understanding of, you know, what areas are disrepair, what a program is going to look like to be able to work with residents to be able to address those, just to mitigate any sort of future liability. Couple lighter side things I want to bring up. If nobody knew, our K-9 program just officially retired. I assume everyone saw that. Doris is no longer actively working. However, she, right? Doris is a she? I believe so. He. Okay, Doris has moved on to retirement. That is going to conclude our K-9 program right now. But I know it was a successful program, and that program was specifically funded. The majority of that was through donations and other sort of volunteer type activities over the years. Oh, everybody knows this, but I wanted to, don't forget, citywide cleanup is starting Thursday, so traffic. If you haven't seen it, I already started seeing people with trailers today.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
Those are my updates. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer anything.
All right. Thank you. City Manager?
The only update I have for you all is we are working on collecting architectural standards for garages for multifamily, but we've dove into this topic. So at the May Planning and Zoning meeting, you are going to get some collective information on all architectural standards comparative to other cities. So we will be bringing that information to you next month.
Thank you.
All right. Staff? Commission? No. All right. Item 9, adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.